Hello, everyone. My name is Richard Adams. Thank you for joining me on the Richard Adams podcast. My first guest today is Simeon Patsolic. Simeon is a junior at John Carroll University and also one of my good friends. Me and Simeon share a lot of similar interests, talking about physics, math, philosophy, leadership. You name them, Simeon and me probably have it in common. So, Simeon, thank you for being the first guest on the podcast. How are you doing today?
Doing very well. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, that is good. Simeon, I got two questions. I'm gonna start asking all the guests as they come on. You're gonna be the first one on here. So the first one's gonna be, what books are you currently reading?
Currently, I'm reading the Odyssey, which is the sequel to the Iliad by Homer.
Hmm. What got you into that?
Um, my roommate Mateo Martin brought it home from a book fair, and he didn't want to read it, so he gave it to me.
You decided to get back into the classics.
Exactly.
That's a
It's always
very, yeah, I was gonna say that's a very interesting starting point for getting into reading. So have you been reading for a long time?
since I learned how to when I was like 4. It's been fun.
What are some of the like books that have kind of been important in your life?
Um, Good question. I think like the first one that really hit home was Sherlock Holmes. That was like a really big one. The
Hmm.
writing was really, really good, and it was like something that got me into critical thinking. It's like something that like you can kind of solve the mysteries in the book yourself if you like think about it.
Like follow along throughout the whole thing.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's a different way of thinking about life and literature, I guess. So it's
When
cool.
were, when were you getting into those kind of books?
Um, between the age of like 7 and 12, I think.
Oh, okay. So when you're getting into those books, you're starting to think more critically, starting to think about the world a little bit differently. Now, one of the things I talked about when we started this podcast was, some of the interests we share, and one of those big things is physics, science, and everything like that. Do you think that kind of played a role into it? That critical thinking kind of mindset?
Most definitely, yeah. It definitely wasn't because of science that I thought that way. It was just how I thought, which is how I got into science in the first place.
Just
And
kind
that
of,
comes through like how my family was raised and how like I associated with my siblings and my parents and stuff like that.
yeah. You kind of had a little bit of an interesting background, just kind of growing up and everything like that. You want to kind of talk about your educational experiences?
Sure, yeah. It's pretty funny. I was homeschooled my entire life except for 1 year of middle school, which was 7th grade. So before middle school, it was basically like a free for all. Like if I wanted to learn something, I could. There was all the books and resources I wanted in our family's library. So like if I wanted it, it was there, but I wasn't really forced to do anything. Like I was on 5th grade math from like the age of 5th grade until like I was 12. So like I didn't go all that far into like anything until I came of 13, I think.
Hmm.
That's when I like actually started wanting to learn myself. So it
So
was
yeah,
fairly interesting.
your first experience with formal education sounds like then seventh grade. So how far did you feel like behind? Would you feel ahead of other kids, or were you kind of on the same page as everyone else?
Um, Math, I was definitely behind.
Mm,
Not all that much, but like I came into that middle school 4 weeks into school. I'm pretty sure
yeah.
it was either 2 or 4 weeks, like in between there, and they had already started stuff. So that was like a shock to me. English wasn't all that difficult. I remember that teacher at the beginning of every class, she'd have us start reading a book. She had like at least 500 books in her classroom. So we'd pick a book and then start reading that. And
Mm.
then we'd keep that book until we finished it, which was really interesting. I enjoyed that a lot. So the first 15 minutes of our 50-minute class was devoted to actually reading stuff, which I appreciated.
Yeah.
And then like essays and stuff, I was fairly terrible at those. Like citations and stuff, never did that. So that was definitely a culture shock.
Yeah.
Science was probably the easiest one for me. It was just like learning a whole bunch of stuff about like it was natural science. I'm fairly certain. I don't remember much except genetics, like hereditary stuff. We
Mm.
built um, what was it? It was like plastic snowmen, and we had to like get them married to other people in the class, like other snowmen in the class, and had like they had different traits like dominant and stuff like that. So that was pretty fun.
Yeah. So you kind of had like this baseline level of like scientific knowledge compared to all the other kids. You were kind of at par with those from a pretty early age. Sounds like you were just you came into it, you were ready to go into those kinds of classes, and how'd that kind of blossom moving forward?
Um, it was really weird. So I did 1 year of middle school, and then I went back to being homeschooled. And from that time, like, I'm not sure why, but as soon as I stopped going to school, I decided that I wanted to go to college. So
Mm,
doing that, you have to pass the standardized tests like SAT or ACT,
yeah.
and you have to do a lot of studying for that. So I just decided that's what I wanted to do. So I went on like online Khan Academy, like online courses, stuff like that. Give me 1 second. Um, like Khan Academy, just YouTube videos, courses given out, like free courses from MIT and other uh, like literature courses, things like that. So I
Yeah.
just like went through all those. I was with my mom at her job. She was a secretary for a law firm, but it
Mhm.
was extremely small. There was like one lawyer there. So I just sit in the back room with my laptop and just grind through stuff. I remember I started at Algebra 1, and then I went all the way through to Calculus 3 in like the span of less than a year. It was less than a year. Because I
Yeah.
remember I started back at homeschooling at the age of 14. No, 15. It was 15. And then I applied to college and got into John Carroll at 16, I think, 16 and a half.
So it
So
was it was really just your self motivation after you got out of school to be like, hey, look, I want to do this, and I want to do this as quickly as possible.
I'm not sure. I guess it was, yeah. It was as quickly as possible. Like I don't think it lacked any like motivate. I guess it was motivation. It was mostly that. Like I don't know where it came from or why I happened to like just want to start just studying. Like that's basically all
Mm.
I did. Like I'd help my dad like clean up the house. I do chores and help him build fences and fun stuff like that around the house. But besides that, it was just like every ounce of my free time was put into either reading books or studying, which was pretty insane now that I look back on it.
Do you think that was by? Do you think that was kind of by choice though? I wonder because like as a kid, you probably had a lot of motivation to just not, to lay around the house and just want to relax and do nothing, and especially because you didn't have a structured format. Do you think that was kind of like one of those factors that played in for you?
I don't know. So when I don't think I did a lot of lying around the house before I started like actually studying. I think it was mostly like my parents had a their own business. It was like landscaping, snow plowing, and tree service. So like they cut down trees, like they climb up them and slice them off with chainsaws. Really insane stuff.
Yeah.
But I'd mostly just be there and I'd just be wandering around. Like sometimes I'd be helping them like move small branches and stuff. But like these were actual like jobs for people, and they didn't want kids running around. So I'd mostly be like just running around, drinking hot chocolate, and sitting in my car
Mm.
watching TV on the little tiny screen on top of the van. So it wasn't it wasn't much sitting around like doing nothing, but it wasn't stuff that was educational. I'd say it was mostly just like exploring. I know we had a lot of metro parks near my house, so I'd always go there, like bike there, and then just wander around the woods for like countless hours, which sounds insane yet again, but that's what I did.
So you decide, hey, look, I'm gonna come and start applying to colleges. Was that like I got to imagine that was kind of like a an unknown process for you at the time.
Yeah, for sure. There was I thought about going to MIT, and then I realized that that place is insane. So I'd have to take a whole bunch of uh, what were those called? Like SAT subject tests, which I took the math one, and I think I did fairly well on that. Not like 900, which is the perfect score. I'm pretty sure. Is it
Yeah,
900? I think it's that.
I believe I didn't take
So
the
whatever
SAT. I
it
only
is,
took
it
the
is.
ACT. Yeah.
Yeah. So whatever that was, I didn't get a perfect score, but I didn't have time to take it again before I applied to schools. So MIT was out,
Yeah.
but I thought about staying another year or not going to college for another year,
Yeah.
and then just like studying everything, like getting higher grades on absolutely everything I could, and
Yeah.
then going somewhere better. But my dad was like, "Nah, go now. Like, school is school. You're gonna get a lot of financial aid going to John Carroll, which is the place I got accepted."
Hmm.
They gave me an insane amount of financial aid. Like, if I didn't stay on campus, they would basically be paying the entire way to go. I remember the first year I owed like $5,000 for the entire year, which is insane considering that both my brother and my sister owe like $50,000 right
Yeah.
now, like after they graduated like 5 years ago,
Yeah.
which is mind boggling to me.
No, it's a very, as someone in that position, it's a very daunting thing to be a part of with all that student loan debt. So you're kind of lucky
Yeah.
to get into that situation. So let's take a step back, right? So you're 16 years old. You just, I don't know the graduation process for you, obviously, but obviously you're scoring high on some of these tests. Was there any requirement for you to say, hey, look, I got a GED of some sort, or I got whatever the high school equivalent was?
No, not as far as I know. So my mom handled most of that.
Mm,
In fact, she created a transcript for me, and then she asked me what grades I got and everything. Like she'd ask me how well I studied something. Like
mm,
she definitely wasn't like a dogmatic, like not to say that regular school is dogmatic, but like yeah, I could have said A for everything and she would have given it to me.
yeah.
I did not do that. Unlike both of my siblings who got 4.0s, I got a 4.81. I was
Mm.
very humble, so I count that towards myself.
Yeah.
But the ACT wasn't all that difficult to me. Like I had two tutors that I went to. One was for English and writing, and one was for math and science. And that was like one of the best moments of my life. I just go to like coffee shops and sit there and just do math problems
Hmm.
and like read books and write essays and like correct grammar on practice sheets in ACT books. It was really fun. I
Yeah.
enjoyed that.
No, I mean, it sounds like I spent a lot of time like studying like early American philosophy. It's kind of like the mid 1800s, and there's a lot of these stories of these like kind of children who kind of were grown up by themselves, right, and had this desire and interest to learn, not from some like formalized school that gave them a set of curriculum and a whole thing like that, but just gave took the opportunity themselves and saw something that they were interested in, and really followed that passion. But I'm assuming, in that mindset, there's obviously the flip side, right? So you're out on your own. You're trying to figure out what's going on in the world. You're trying to learn as much as you can. Um, did you ever have that temptation, like, hey, look, I don't want to go to college. I want to try and figure out the world by myself? Or is it like you kind of knew in the back of your head, like, I'm going to go to college. I'm going to try and figure this out? Those kind of things were always in the back of your mind.
So my brother is 33, which is how many years older than me? 14.
Yeah.
So he went to college when I was a very young lad. So I'd always imagined either going to college or becoming a professional soccer player. I was actually really good at that, really good at that.
Yeah.
But I quit. I played with a guy who moved to Switzerland to play on their national team, which isn't all that good of a national team. But I was 14 and he was like 20.
Yeah.
So that was fun. I enjoyed that. I mention that story whenever people bring up soccer. But I wanted to either do that or be a mathematician
Hmm.
because that's what my brother was, and I thought he was cool. So that's
So
what I wanted to go
one of the
after.
big role models in your life you kind of talk about.
Yeah. So he was just like, my dad was kind of sick when we were younger, so he'd spend most of his time resting,
Hmm.
and then he'd be up like during the nighttime. Like his sleep schedule was pretty fucked.
Yeah.
But not exactly sure why that was, because I was pretty young and no one ever told me
Explained it.
why.
Yeah.
He wasn't really around as much as my mother or my older brother,
Yeah.
or my sister for that fact. So, yeah, he was one of my role models, and my dad didn't go to college for anything like STEM related, which
Yeah.
is what I was interested in. So, yeah, I definitely say that my brother had a big role in my life.
So yeah, I mean, let's take it to that realm for a second. So, I know your brother decently well. And so when we're talking about your brother, he's obviously in the kind of field of working with code, as a developer. So when you got interested in kind of seeing him as your role model, trying to follow a similar path to him, did you pursue something similar? Is that why you chose physics? Is that why you kind of got these interests into coding? Is that why you got these interests into all this other stuff?
Um, for physics,
Yeah.
mostly, yeah. So I came to John Carroll wanting to major in math. That was the main thing I wanted to do. I was really good at that. That
Hmm.
was the high score on my ACT. That was really fun, and I enjoyed a lot. Like I watch random videos about math online, so a really big motivation for me.
Yeah.
But my advisor was in physics, and he told me to consider getting either like a minor or a double major in physics as well.
Mm.
And during my um, like independent study, I learned a lot about physics because that was one of the subjects I covered. And quantum physics is insane. Like if you look up stuff like that, like I'm not sure how to like phrase it here and not sound like an idiot, but it's awesome stuff.
Yeah.
Like particles, wave, particle duality, um, quantum entanglement, all that stuff is really awesome. Like the universe is trying to hide stuff from us, man. And it's like the only spot that you can see that, besides
Yeah.
maybe like psychology, not knowing how the brain works. That's like one area where science is trying to trick us,
Yeah.
like actual like nature, not like scientists
Yeah.
that believe in a moon landing.
No,
But
there's a really good two-part documentary for anybody who's interested in that on quantum physics online. I can't remember the name of it, but if you look up quantum physics part 1, I'm sure you could find the intro documentary to just some of the really basics of it, and once you start learning about it, that's exactly what Simeon said. You know, like it starts confusing the hell out of people right off the bat. It's one of those
yeah,
things.
and that's why I found it really exciting. So
Yeah.
when my advisor told me to consider getting either a minor or a double major, I jumped on that, and then my math department promptly died and everyone retired.
Mm.
So I swapped over to just physics because I was enjoying that.
Yeah.
And here we are today. I'm trying to major in physics with a minor in either math or a BA in physics and a minor in computer science and math.
Mm.
I'm not sure which I'm going to do yet.
So you got a little bit of time ahead of you, so I wouldn't don't stress about it too much, I would say. So when we're talking about these kind of things, let's dive into physics a little bit here. Um, you broke down physics to me in a very wonderful way when we were talking about, what's the sort of difference between math and physics and all these other kind of fields. So when we take a step back, math, physics, chemistry, biology, let's kind of get into the breakdown of how you at least view them from your perspective.
All right. So the basic principles of life and like basically everything is math.
Yeah.
Like throughout all of history, math has been the one thing that everyone knows. Like cavemen counting on sticks,
Yeah.
stuff like that. Like we need math to exist the way we do today.
Yeah.
And knowing that, leading into physics, physics is all math. It's just
Mm.
applied physics, like things like classical mechanics,
Mm-hmm.
like the Earth rotating around the sun. That's all math,
Yeah.
and all of that leads to chemistry. If you know how these things work, you can apply them to certain formulas and things like that, which are based on math yet again, and they give you different chemicals, different reactions, exciting stuff like that, and then you apply those, and it's biology.
Mm.
So you lead from math all the way up to the world that we live in now, which is just biology. That's all it is.
Yeah.
Chemical reactions in the brain, depending on how you believe in emotions and stuff like that, is all just math, which is insane to think
Yeah.
about.
And I mean, that brings in the whole philosophical arguments of how the brain functions and how these all work. But when we really start to look at it, what we're talking about here is like some kind of pyramid structure, right? So at the base level, we got mathematics. Right below that's going to be your kind of like physics, which is going to be applied mathematics. Below that is chemistry and how these like elements and other kind of particles interact with each other. And then below that is going to be kind of where we're talking about biology. Psychology is probably going to be on a similar playing field as that once we start diving a little bit more deep down. Is that sort of a basic understanding of it?
Yeah, exactly that. As far as I understand it, which is pretty awesome. Like leading everything back to one simple subject like math. Everyone hates math, which is sad because it's really cool. Like, basically, math is really fun.
Yeah.
Like, the actual math that we're supposed to be learning. According to one of my professors, math we end at calculus, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's as far as most people get, and calculus sucks. Like, you know how when you're taking so when you first got into college, you have, like, gen eds. You have, like, things like biology 101,
Yeah.
physics 101, chemistry 101. All these things are 101s.
Yeah.
And what do you get when you take those classes? You have, like, spice of everything, like
Mm.
quantum physics, different it's like introducing you to the entire field of that subject, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's trying to see if you want anything in that. And if you do, you continue on, you major in that. And then if you want, you go to grad school in a specific area of that. What
Yeah.
about math? We have math 101? No, we have fucking calculus, man.
Yeah.
Calculus. Calculus is not all of math. It's a different kind of math. So when you lead people in and you say that calculus is like math 101, people hate it because
Yeah.
most people hate calculus because it's really hard. And the mindset you need for that is not the same as other classes. Things
Yeah.
like intro proofs, which I'm taking in the spring, like all these things, like math is really misrepresented in the general public.
Yeah.
And people think that like STEM is really hard. Like every time I mention being in physics, people are like, "Oh, you must be smart." I'm an idiot, in my own words. Like physics isn't all that hard when you put the time in and you understand what's going on.
Yeah.
Some people might need more time to study these. Some people need to go to office hours more. But like, if you want to learn it, you can.
Yeah.
Anyone can do it. It's just your mindset and whether or not you want to do it.
Yeah, I think one of the things we should probably get into is, as both of us are pretty big fans of studying mindsets, is how do you think about kind of learning, and how do you think that differentiates from some of your classmates, right? So one of the things that really brought me to say I want Simeon as one of my first guests on the podcast, and one thing that kind of interests me in being one of your friends is like you have a very interesting view on learning. Like you have a very driven view of like I can understand something and I can learn it if I dedicate enough time and I figure out enough ways to get through it. So would you kind of categorize your own learnings or own view on
So
learning?
yeah. So basically, it all leads back to how I learned when I was younger. Like
Yeah.
everything was self motivated. Like if you want to learn something, you can. I did. Like
Yeah.
I learned it in a lot fewer time than most people learn those, which is kind of an ego boost most of the time.
Yeah.
So like knowing that I can do that means that learning all these things with everyone else is like pretty simple. If I want to do it, I do. And in
Mm-hmm.
some cases that hurts me. Like moving at other people's pace, like I get
Yeah.
distracted and I don't like put as much focus into some things as I should, which is an issue I'm dealing with
Yeah.
and I'm trying to solve based on like attention span and stuff like that.
Mm.
But in the end, I think my mindset comes back to like self motivation. Like you
Mm.
need that. And why are you doing it? I know some people who they get really high grades in everything. Like most classes they have an A in.
Yeah.
But their reasoning for that is just because it's the best and like they want a good job, they want to get paid as much as possible, they want to have a good family. Like so, this is where they start. But why do they want that? Like,
Yeah.
is that really what they want, or is it like the ideal vision of their life? Is that like general or specifically for them?
Mm.
And I feel like getting high grades is really like it's worth it. But if you have other goals in mind, then you should be going after those with grades like in like shotgun. Like it's the second thing you should be aiming for, or like maybe the third, like depending on what you want.
Yeah. No, I mean,
So
you bring up a really interesting point there. I think when people think about grade point averages, right, there's obviously this sort of rudimentary understanding of like I need to get a 3.0 or 4.0. But I mean, your concept of learning probably, and it sounds like, is a lot broader than that. Like these topics are interesting, barring whatever GPA that you're applying to it, barring this 4.0 skill that you're applying to it, barring like, the mandatory paper that you're trying to get me to write for the end of the semester. Like it seems like your view on learning these subjects isn't as narrowed down as like, hey, look, I need to get a job after college. It's, hey, look, this is something that I have a desire to learn. I have something that, drives me to learn this, that isn't just there's a paper due at the end of the semester and I better know the subject before I write it. So do you kind of feel like that you kind of fall into this kind of bucket?
I think so, yeah. And I'm not like I don't find anyone else who agrees with the exact same ideas as me.
Hmm.
Like either they don't care at all or they care way too much,
Yeah.
and for the wrong reasons, in my opinion. Like if they can't back up exactly why they're doing it that way, I don't necessarily think that they've thought it all the way through. Like it's definitely a good goal, but is it the goal that you should be aiming for?
Yeah.
And in most cases, it's probably not. Same thing with like college. Like most people
Mhm.
don't even need to go to college. Like they go because that's where you're supposed to be, and like
Yeah.
your parents want you to go. But in the end, it's like an insane money drain for most people if they don't know exactly what they want to do or like have an idea of where they want to aim or like what kind of jobs they want to get. And most
Yeah.
people don't know. So like going is kind of useless for most people, I think.
You're just spinning a circle that you're not sure where it's going to end anyway. I
Exactly.
think that's a very, I had a great conversation with one of my coworkers yesterday, and we were talking about sort of the generational difference between our generation and his generation. Now, he was somebody whose parents fought in World War II. He was somebody who said, look, if I needed to break something down, I was the one who was going to break it down. I was the one who was going to try to repair it. I was the one who was going to try to go through all these processes. And it does seem like our generation has like a lack of this desire to understand how the world around us works more than just, just keep driving, just keep driving, just keep going because, everyone's going to college, so just go to college. Everyone's doing this, so just do that. Do you think that you would sort of stand out as an outlier in that?
I mean, I'm not sure because I'm in college right now. So following the everyone else as far as everyone else is concerned. So like
Mm,
whether my reasons are different, my path is the same right now,
yeah. Well,
which is
that makes sense.
curious.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you kind of ended up in the same place as everyone else, even given that different mindset.
Yeah. But like it's where I want to be,
Mm,
at least right now. So like I want to be learning these things. Like school is a really great opportunity for networking.
mm,
Like there's at least 50 people that I've talked to that have opportunities that I could go into and work there for the rest of my life. Like
yeah,
it's really big on opportunities. Like there's people everywhere who are willing to talk to you because you're young and you don't know what you want to do yet. So like they're there to help. But if you're just sitting around doing nothing, like there's no point in going.
yeah. No, I think that's one of the great tips that you can probably give any college kid. Like, if you're too afraid to walk up to somebody and talk to somebody, college might not be for you yet because there's a lot of opportunities that'll be presented to you. And some of them just take the courage to saying, hey, my name is Richard Adams. It's like, I'm a business major. I'm studying human resources. I have a really big interest in, learning about your company. I think that's what a lot of people miss is this opportunity, this golden opportunity to kind of reach out to these really interesting people. So when we talk about your kind of college experience, how do you find those people for yourself?
It's an interesting question. They come to me most of the time. I'm gonna be honest. Most of them come to me. Sometimes so the first friend that I made in college was from a different country. He wasn't an immigrant. He was here from some exchange program or something
Hmm.
like that.
Yeah,
And he was the first lab partner I had in physics.
yeah.
And Ben is here. So I will be back in a few moments.
Okay. Sorry about that, guys. Just a quick intercession between these two starts of the podcast. We are back right now, Simeon Patsolic. Simeon, so the last question we left off on was kind of meeting interesting people in your life. You're starting a story about how your first lab partner. Can you kind of elaborate where you're going with that?
Yeah, so my first lab in physics was actually online. So that was during 2020. So that was when COVID was pretty serious. So
Hmm.
we started out online, and our first lab was I had this guy who was from Belize, and he was pretty cool. So he had this weird accent, which gave me like who is this guy? I've never heard this accent before. It's like kind of Caribbean esque. It was really awesome. So I started talking to this guy, and he became one of my best friends that I've met uh, at this school so far. And his entire like mindset about life and like how to study and things like that were insane. So like the fact that I got to meet him so early on in my
Mm.
career was a really big blessing for me. Like getting to know like people outside of America.
Yeah.
It's a really important thing. So that was like the first one. That was he's probably one of the top 5 most influential people, like students that I've met
Hmm.
at John Carroll. So it was a
And that was
pretty
like
big
right
one.
off the bat when you got there too, right?
Yeah, that was like the second day of school. So that was crazy.
Kind of looked into that.
Yeah.
So like, who are some other people that you like, other counters that you had like this?
So it's kind of weird that it seems like everywhere I go, like my dad taught me a whole bunch of stuff, but like one was that always be curious. Like
Mm,
if you have questions about things, like show people that you're curious about things and it'll work out for you. So I was in Chicago with one of my friends last summer,
mm-hmm.
and we were walking down the road like looking for thrift stores and stuff for clothes. It
Yeah.
was basically not there was like no real reason to do it, but we saw this candle shop and I was like, "Well, I like candles." So we went inside. We both decided that like that's something we could do. We weren't wasting time. Like we didn't set a schedule. So like we left the room open in the day to like try different things. So we
Mm,
went in there, met this guy who was like probably 30 years old, something like that. Like he was a young guy, like,
yeah.
not someone you'd expect to be working in a candle shop. But he gave us a tour of the entire place, which was really awesome. We like asked him questions about how things went down. He gave us like a few free candles, which was awesome.
Mm,
And then he asked us what we were majoring in. I told him that I was doing physics, and he's like, "Oh, really?" So I'm actually applying to be a particle accelerator technician at Argonne National Lab, which is like one of the best labs in the entire country. And actually, one of my
just walked into it,
professors was
right? Yeah, you just
yeah.
walked into this
It was
conversation.
just like it was weird. It was like what a coincidence that was, and it
Yeah.
was pretty insane. And things like that happen to me all the time.
Mm,
Like another example from that summer, like there was there's this guy at John Carroll, and he knows who I am. He's like one of the top three like most influential guys on the campus. So like he's pretty big, and he knows who I was because I worked maintenance there,
mm,
like during the school year, and he knew I was in physics, and because it's an Ignatian like kind of college, like they have different meetings with people from like the Vatican and stuff,
yeah.
and they actually had the Pope's head astronomer show up to give like a talk for like 50 to 200 people. I'm not sure how many it was, but like it was a club, like a country club kind of thing.
Yeah.
And he just invited me out of the blue because like he knew who I was. He knew I was in physics, and he knew I'd probably enjoy going there. So I showed up, and they put me at table one. Like there's like probably 50 tables there, and they like put me at table one with the president of John Carroll on the left and me on the right of this guy. It's like, how the hell do I end up in these situations? Like, it's
Yeah.
crazy. I'll take all of them, but like at some point, I just start to wonder, like, how does this happen to me? Like, I don't know. So it's
Yeah.
just
It
insane.
it's catching up with you is one of the funnest like endeavors I can go on, or the most fun endeavors I can go on, I guess. It's just one of those things where like if I leave you for a month, there is a new story about you meeting somebody who I'm like, there is no way this is real. Like the Chicago story when you walked in that candle shop, like that seems completely out of the blue, completely crazy. And then obviously the Pope's astronomer, that was a big story when you told me because I was like, first of all, who knew that the Pope had had astronomer? And then
Yeah.
second of all, how did you luck into just walking into that situation? Is it a little bit of right time, right place, do you think? Or is it a little bit like being prepared for that situation when it comes up? Or is it just the most randomness of the universe and we can't even put a pin on what it is?
I mean, I think it's probably mostly random,
Mm,
but people know that in most cases, I really want to like do as much as possible.
yeah.
Like the organization, like I try and get involved in as many organizations on campus and stuff as possible.
Yeah.
Like just to have fun, like to get out there and do a whole bunch of stuff. So like people knowing that I'm there and like I really enjoy being able to help people. So like if I can do things with a good attitude and like figure it out and not complain about like work or anything like that, people seem to notice that from me. Like I try and do as much as possible.
Yeah.
So I think people appreciate that, which is why that one guy appreciated me. And then just like coming with the attitude to be excited about things that you don't know. Like actually listening to what people have to say and like being excited about what they're saying really helps.
Yeah, I remember we were actually in. So me and Simeon have embarked on a few adventures ourselves in terms of just going out in the world. And one of the, I mean, to attest to kind of Simeon's own luck and randomness of how he ends up in situations, we were actually at Micro Center, and I think Simeon, I'm pretty sure you remember this story. This only happened about 2 or 3 weeks ago now. And we were just walking around Micro Center, just looking at buying some Raspberry Pis. We were working on a coding project. Um, and we're going through the section and we just run into some guy and he just asked us a question. He's like, "Hey, do you guys know where," I can't remember what he was asking for now, but some kind of sensor, right? Am I getting the story right?
I think he was asking for a sensor, yeah.
Yeah, so he's asking for some sort of sensor. And then, Simeon obviously chimes in. Simeon and me, we went into that project. Simeon knew a little bit more than me, but not a crazy amount more than me, I don't think, in terms of the technology and what was out there. But,
Mm.
the willingness to kind of ask questions, the willingness to kind of talk to that person, and kind of the willingness to be in that situation. Because I think it takes a lot of, for a lot of people, it takes courage, right? There's that level of anxiety that comes with it. But I don't know, do you think that's present for you still? Like, when you come to a situation, I mean, even that situation specifically, let's dive into that for a second. Like, if you come into that situation, you see that guy, he asked a question, and it wasn't just like a 2 second, oh, I have no idea what you're talking about, then move on. You kind of like engaged in the conversation with him. Like, did you feel any anxiety in that situation, or is that something that's so natural to you?
Um, it's weird because being homeschooled, like I didn't talk to many people
Mm,
when I was younger, so like I had a lot of social anxiety when it came to like things such as joining a soccer team
yeah.
and things like that. Like talking to people was weird for me. But it seemed like after I like, kind of grew out of that.
Mm,
So I turned 15, and most of the advice that my dad gave me, like things like being curious and asking people stuff, he did that most of the time, not in the same kind of genre of things, like different subjects.
mm-hmm.
Like he wasn't academically inclined, but he'd ask those questions to people most of the time, and it seemed like that was something that he wanted me to do, and I didn't pick that up right away. Like most of the advice that my parents gave me were pretty sound, even if they didn't listen to like most of it themselves, which is curious. Like all their advice was really good, but
Yeah.
that was something that I didn't even realize I was picking up. Like you just have to be curious about things, and if you have a question, especially if it's something that you're interested in, it just flows off the tongue. And if you really care about it, then people seem to appreciate that.
Yeah. I think, obviously in that situation, that guy did. We engaged in like a really deep conversation. And I remember the conversation spiraled so far that we started getting other people kind of in the micro center involved. And we walked away from the conversation inevitably, but there was a continuous conversation that kept going on. They might have pulled a few other people into it. So, like, kind of sparking this level of conversation that would not have happened had we not just started asking a few questions to the guy. So when
Yeah.
you look at something like that, when you look at like engaging with people, do you think like you had such a rapid development process, it feels like to me, and maybe to some of the people listening too. So going from middle school, going to what essentially is homeschool, high school, and then just deciding, hey, look, I'm good enough to go to college. I'll just go to college right now. Was there really anything in the water, so to speak? Was there anything that kind of like initiated this change besides your own self just going, I'm just gonna start doing it, right? Because you came into seventh grade, you had no you had no baseline understanding of a lot of the similar concepts that they were talking about. You said you were a little bit behind in math. You were pretty much on the same level for some of the subjects, but you know what kicked in between this little period that we're looking at here that really changed your fundamental from how you talked to people, how you saw people, but also obviously, we talked about this in like our previous conversations, but you scored pretty well on some of the standardized tests as well.
Yeah. So that was, I'm not sure if there was some like key moment where things switched.
Hmm.
I did pretty well on the test because I studied a lot for those. I definitely messed up a few things on English, but I scored pretty well. So I think that's one of the reasons why I decided to come to John Carroll, because he gave me so many scholarships for that.
Yeah.
But I think it just came down to time spent on it. Like
Yeah.
I'm not sure about, like I couldn't name you one day where things just like switched for me. Like
Yeah.
I decided, you know what, this is what I want to do. But I think it had to do with realizing that school was going to take effort. Like
Mm,
before I went to middle school, I didn't know what was required of me in order to get to where I wanted to be, which was going to college.
yeah.
But after I got like that sample of what people knew and what I didn't know, it's when I realized that, like, before then, I could have been ahead, I could have been behind. I wouldn't have known
Yeah, there's no one to
without having
compare
that
to. Yeah.
metric to know. Yeah. So after I left there, it didn't even start when I was in middle school. Middle school was basically just adjusting to people.
Yeah.
That's where I learned how to talk to people and deal with people. And after that is when academics hit because I was alone again. So I spent like, so homeschooling is by myself. There's like my family, but no one else.
Hmm.
And I spent most of that time just studying because that's the thing that I wanted to focus on. And I think having nothing to distract you really helps with that goal.
Yeah.
And being able to say that, all right, I went to middle school and everyone there is going to college. And if I don't want to do soccer, which I decided I didn't want to do, then I might as well go and be a mathematician because that's fun.
Yeah.
Because I still enjoy doing that. So I just went from there and it all worked out. In fact, I went another story running back to socializing. I went to Case Western for an open house
Hmm.
when I was homeschooled, and I was 15 at the time, I think. And I showed up, and my mom had to go back to work, so she dropped me off. And I was standing there in a room full of like 50 people.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what to do. Like, I was an antisocial kid at that point. So I was just standing around kind of helpless. And this kid walks up to like the left of me. And I
Hmm.
see him like kind of in the same boat as me. So I turn over and I'm like, yo, are you here for this open house? Like, what are you up to? He's like, yeah, my mom left me here. I'm actually homeschooled. And I was like, yo, that is crazy. Like, the coincidences I run into, like,
Yeah.
even that one, just being all of these combined, one is crazy enough, but, like, the tens that I go through, like, it's double digits of the amount of crazy stuff I go through.
Yeah.
But even this one, and this kid was really cool. He's one of my good friends to this day, and he ended up not getting accepted case just like me, but he's in the Air Force now as, like, an ethical hacker, so, like, penetration testing and stuff, like, what hackers do, like,
Yeah.
what you think when you watch movies, which is insane,
And that was
and
just from a chance encounter. Just, hey, look, mom, I want to go see what Case is like, and just
exactly,
a chance encounter. And
yeah.
I mean, I dive into this part of your life because me and you have known each other for about a year now. We talked about some of the like getting into college, some of the post college, but I dive into this part because I don't know enough, right? I don't know half the stuff about this, but let's start diving into a little bit of current state and where we're at, because I think people kind of want to know what do you think is upcoming for you? What are you studying right now? Like, what are those things that back in the day you said you spent time on and you got pretty good at pretty quickly? It seems like. So, what are the things you're spending time on now to kind of get you, prepared for when you graduate and then post that?
So, I'll start before that and lead up to what I'm doing now. So, I was talking to you about, like, networking with people,
Yeah,
and you told me that you were talking to this CEO. This was how long ago? Like, 2 months,
yeah.
you
Three
think?
months ago, I think was the
Yeah.
first time. Yeah,
And you said that you just emailed the CEO to talk to him about his life and
yeah,
how he thought about things. And that really inspired me. And the one class that I was taking that semester, there was this communications professor
hmm,
who just seemed like a guy that I would want to model my life after. Like, he was up till 2 a.m. grading papers, working on things that would take other people 4 years to do, and he did in 4 months just because of his work ethic.
yeah.
So I decided to go to his office just to talk to him. Like, it wasn't even his office hours. I just knocked on the door, and he was there. He was actually writing a paper that was due at midnight that night for some journal, which I did not realize until after he told me that. But
Hmm.
so I just went in and I was like, "What do you think I should be doing?" Because I felt like after I came into college, I started to plateau on the academic side.
Mm.
I got some really good friends, but I feel like everything else went kind of downhill. Like, my motivation and my work ethic kind of plateaued,
Yeah.
basically. And I wanted to know what he thought about that. So I basically told him everything I've told you guys. And he just told me that I need to work on like 5 separate things, like mental health, exercise, good food, water. He's a priest, so he said to meditate or pray, read the Bible, some form of um, religion or something to keep your mind in the right place.
Yeah.
and to make sure that I wasn't too hard on myself. Those
Yeah.
were the basic things he told me to do. And then I realized that, like, he said not to be hard on myself, but I really wasn't. Like, I say that I am hard on myself, but then I don't do anything. Like, I might say that I'm lazy, but do I try and fix that? Not really. Like,
Mm.
that's what I was thinking of at that time. And school was kind of tough. I lost some of my friends, and things were going like, you graduated.
Yeah.
A whole bunch of my friends graduated, so like I was going through some stuff.
Yeah.
Got a house, so like a whole bunch of things changed. So I was going through a lot, but that's no excuse for like plateauing in anything. Like,
Yeah.
I have time for stuff. Everyone has time for things. If they don't
Yeah.
have time to talk to you, like, they just don't want to talk to you. That's
Yeah.
what I had to realize. So that kind of sucks, but I had to realize it. And this has all been happening like the last couple of months.
Yeah.
And after school ended, I decided to work on all those things that he gave me, and it really seemed to work like the second day. Like, all these YouTube shorts and stuff that I used to watch, like,
Yeah.
they're everywhere now. Like TikTok, it just killed my attention span.
Yeah.
So like going to classes and working on stuff, even like outside, like learning anything, like by myself at all, like I couldn't focus on it, so I didn't do it.
Yeah.
And that was definitely an issue. Like, I love to learn things.
Yeah.
Like, not even school. Like, during my first semester, I learned a whole bunch of stuff that wasn't even in school.
Yeah.
And like, there's so many opportunities for you out there to like learn online courses, doing code, all that jazz. So like Python, things like that. And I wasn't doing any of it because like my attention span was fried. I had no motivation. So I just started reading books again. I
Mm.
started doing that. I started meditating, like just 5 minutes, doing nothing. You just sit there, and it really helped. I started eating actual food, not just Little Caesars pizza every Friday, which was actually really good for me. I started running again, and all those things combined, like, they were really good advice from this guy.
Yeah.
And I feel like my ability to learn has definitely increased, and my joy in actually figuring stuff out myself. Like, I'm taking a few online courses for things like machine learning
Yeah.
and basic Python. I know most basic Python, but I just want to go through it. You get like certificates online, so it's worth going through.
Yeah.
And I feel like all that was possible just because of the advice that that one guy gave me.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the crazy things about kind of your ability in learning too is, a lot of people can hear advice like that, focus on those 5 things, and that can come right in one ear out the other kind of thing, right? But
Yeah.
it does seem like you have a genuine interest not only in the things that people say, in the conversation that you're currently having, but some of these things seem to leave a little bit of impact on you, right? Like you have that genuine sense of curiosity, that genuine need to learn seems to shine through in some of the advice that you receive as well.
Yeah, I think the reason that I really try and heed as much advice as possible is because other people that I know in my life, not you, thank God, don't really listen to advice that people give them. Like, they give them advice and they hear it, like they're like, okay, I understand, and then they just either do the opposite, ignore that advice, and then it comes back to bite them, and they complain about the result that they got by not listening to other people.
Yeah.
It's like, well, you got there yourself after other people gave you the advice. If you didn't get the advice and you just went through this, I didn't understand the complaints, but come on, like, people
Yeah.
gave you this advice. So I think that's one of the reasons that I really like to take as much advice as possible. And this guy also said, rounding back to that,
Yeah.
was criticism is like the best tool that you can get, even if it's coming from someone who doesn't really care about your well-being. You can
Mm.
always get something positive out of criticism,
Yeah.
which I've come to adopt, and I think that's really helping me out.
Yeah, I think that's one of the ones that I struggle with a little bit personally, right? So that's professional criticism on my front, probably more so than personal criticism, maybe from a college student's perspective, or maybe academic criticism in forms of grades or teacher constructive feedback. Professional feedback is just as brutal as receiving a bad grade on a test, right? So it's certainly something that becomes hard to deal with. Is like keeping your ego out of the way to be able to say, you know what, maybe there is some truth to like hearing, okay, like I need to improve this aspect, I need to focus on this thing, I need to focus on this thing, I need to stop worrying about this and do this. So I think that mindset that you have right now, is going to work beautifully, at least in my understanding of the business world and how I've been going through it in the first 6 months after college. So it certainly is an interesting way to kind of look at the things that you're dealing with. And
Yeah.
yeah, let's circle back on that. So you take some classes on Python, you take some classes on machine learning. Um, are those kind of your focuses right now? Is that what you're kind of working towards, or just getting a better understanding of those kind of subjects?
So I just learned a lot about them because people were talking about them. So I figured it was something I could do. One of my classmates sent me a link to Coursera, which is just on some kind of online like courses. Like you can get a master's online,
Mm,
100% online,
yeah,
and this class was free. So I just signed up for it, and it's basically supposed to take you 3 weeks to do, and it just runs through the basics of machine learning. And I thought that was something that would probably be useful to me in the future. Like I like coding. The first class I took at John Carroll in Python, I got an A plus, and I got hundreds on all of the tests that I took,
yeah.
except for one homework assignment, which I got a zero. Blame Marco Rubio for that one. Um, but that was because I felt like it was something that I really enjoyed doing, and it came naturally to me.
Yeah.
So being able to do that online, it's something that brings me a lot of joy. So it's one of the things that I decided to do. Like other things that I'm not so interested in doing, like maybe psychology or something like that, I wouldn't be as inclined to seek out myself to do over
Mm.
break. But this is one that I think is pretty cool and would probably be useful to me in the future.
Yeah, that's one of the quotes that kind of stands out in my life. Warren Buffett. It's not really a quote, more so a philosophy that Warren Buffett talks about a lot. I'm a big believer in reading and listening to as many people as you can as well. Warren Buffett's been a big influence on my life. One of the things he always talks about is bad in your wheelhouse, right? You don't want to, if you don't know anything about the business, don't invest in the business, is how he uses that perspective. But he also talks about, I'm in a time where my skill set is really valuable, and my skill set is something that the economy that we have set up values whatever my skill is, and very similarly to you, right? Like if I, physics or people who work in physics, people who work in engineering, people who work in these kind of applied mathematics fields seem to be doing pretty good right now from a financial perspective, but also seem to be doing pretty good from in terms of needing to learn from, right? Like the Neil deGrasse Tysons of the world are obviously making a huge um, media push currently, and some of these other like massive physics people are getting a platform. Is that kind of where you would like to see yourself at too, on the forefront of like the teaching aspect of it, right? You get so much good advice, you hear so many like positive things that have made an impact on you. Is teaching kind of things you learned something that you're really passionate about, right?
Mhm. I'm not sure if I want to go into teaching
Mm,
per se. My the thing that brings me the most joy now is just learning stuff.
mm,
Like I was talking to someone yesterday about what I wanted to do in life,
yeah.
and I met her like a day before. Yet again, someone else that I met. I was working at my IT service desk, like the help desk at our school,
Yeah.
and there's two chairs, and she sits down in the one next to me, and she's like, "What are you doing?" And I was working on my machine learning course.
Yeah.
I was like, "I'm just working on this online course." She's like, "Is that required for school?" I was like, "No, it's just something that I wanted to do because I thought it would be fun." And she doesn't get that often, so she started questioning me about like why I was doing it, what I like learning, what I
Yeah.
enjoy doing, stuff like that. And actually, right then, one of my favorite math professors walked in and started talking about like cool math he knows and stuff like that, and it got her really excited.
Yeah.
And he started explaining things like predicting tic-tac-toe games. So he wrote down a game, hit it behind his back, she didn't see it, and then he played a game against her. And then he pulled out the Post-it note, and it was the exact same game. And, like, the joy on her face was so awesome. Like, she didn't know why it worked, but she wanted to know how it worked,
Yeah.
and stuff like that. Like, if I can bring joy by my learning of something, I don't even have to know anything, like, I don't need to know all the aspects of it. If I'm just enjoying learning it, I think it helps other people learn it as well. Like, if they think
Mm,
it's exciting. So, I'm not really big on teaching. I don't like the school system that we're in, like that
yeah.
kind of teaching. I'll give you my favorite quote now. It kind of ties into this.
Yeah.
It's by Richard Feynman. He
Yeah.
was a physicist that was like really big on communication of science and
Mm.
like trying to bring things down to the simplest form so that anyone could understand it, which is what I really respect. He said, as I get older, I realize being wrong isn't a bad thing like they teach you in school.
Mm.
It's an opportunity to learn something. And I think that really stands for everything that I like hold dear at this time. Like I feel like school teaches you that either you're right or you're wrong. And
Yeah.
as soon as you get it wrong, if you fail a test, like most of the time, you can't redo it. Like you've already failed. Like if you fail a class, but you learned a lot, like by the end of it, it still says you failed. And that might be true for some people, like maybe 10%, like people who really don't care.
Yeah.
But other people might be really trying to learn and learned a lot of things, but they just didn't do well on the tests. They didn't know specific questions on the tests. It really doesn't matter. Like, I don't think tests or school is really it's more of like a cookie cutter kind of education that I'm not really a fan of.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm here anyway, so it's kind of hypocritical, but I don't think it's the best way of learning. I think it's the only way we have now for people to like understand that you stood with something for like 4 years. Like you can
Yeah.
stick something that's difficult out, but I don't think it's the best metric. So I don't think I'd want to be associated with it
I gotcha.
as much.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of one of the things that I found interesting in your life when we talked about that earlier too, right? Is like you did kind of have a learning style that was unique, like very on your own, very, you know, there is no real consequences to not succeeding. There is no real consequences to, you know, besides your own personal failure and your own personal, beliefs on yourself and how you want to become in this world. But there was nothing to hold you saying, well, I'm gonna, there's a societal expectation, right? So school provides a societal expectation of just not failing your classes, which is sort of the thing that prevents you from failing for a large majority of the population. But when you're growing up and you're in this situation where you're kind of learning by yourself, you don't have that. You don't have this incessant need to be like, well, I don't want to be that one kid who gets held back, or, I need to learn this just because there's a test coming up. You didn't, it doesn't seem like through any, anybody in your life that they push you to say, hey, you need to do this now. You need to get this done now. If you're not doing this, you're not going to be successful. It seemed like you developed these kind of mindsets on your own by just watching and observing other people.
Yeah, definitely.
So on that track and on that like kind of method, do you think, and this is a generalized statement, do you think that getting into the school system, as you kind of talked about, has sort of lost some of your excitement about learning that you had before you kind of got into the upper levels of education, or was
For
that
sure.
just a tied in consequence of just the time that you were in?
I think it was a myriad of things. I think one was that I stopped trying to learn myself.
Mm,
Like I left it to my professors to teach me stuff,
yeah,
and I didn't try and go above and beyond to learn things that I thought were cool. Like spending free time playing video games or something like that. Because instead of watching cool videos about math or science, I was like, I've already got that for the week. I learned about
yeah,
um, things in physics one or something like that. I think that really hindered me, and that's not school's fault. That's my fault. And
mm,
now that I realize it, I can move forward and actually try to be the best version of me I can. My mom's best life advice, I think, was always be a lifetime learner. Like
yeah,
constantly learn, constantly try and improve yourself, and always take criticism. And I think school was kind of like it was just a daily schedule. Like you learn one
yeah,
thing and then you're done. But like I'm always trying to learn stuff. Like
yeah,
that's what I want to be. And if I can make more time by getting better at studying and paying attention in classes and like really getting as efficient as possible at learning things, then I'll have more time to actually work on things myself and be more of an independent learner like
yeah,
by myself in other things, even when I'm in school. There's always opportunities, and it's probably greater now than it ever was when I was at my parents' house because I have so many people that are willing to talk to me. I actually told my boss yesterday. So I saw him getting in an elevator, and I walked and I was like, "What's going on, man?" He was my former boss, the one that I worked for last summer,
hmm
and I was just asking him how his day was going. Thought I'd take the opportunity to like make an appearance after I hadn't seen him for about 4 months. And he's like, I saw this. What was it? It was a news story on Rubik's cubes and how you like solve them to make little like basically pictures on screens are just pixels.
Oh,
So like if you have enough pixels, you can create a picture.
yeah,
And this girl took a whole bunch of Rubik's cubes and made pictures out of them, like portraits of Marilyn Monroe and Tupac, things
yeah,
like that. She
yeah.
built those, and he just told me about that because he thought it would be cool, and I showed genuine interest in that because I thought it was awesome. I have Rubik's cubes sitting right next to me. Like I saw those all the time. It's awesome.
Yeah.
And he saw that I was still excited about that, and apparently he told me after this that his brother works at NASA. And I was really surprised by that one because I've known him for like 3 years, and I'm a big fan of NASA. He's like, I'll send him your email. Let me know what you want me to tell him, and I'll see if we can get you some kind of opportunity there. Maybe like an internship if possible. That's like the best, or just a visit to the place. That would be awesome too.
Yeah.
And I think just being constantly curious about those things, like opportunities always follow me. I'm not sure if that's because I'm blessed by God or it's my attitude or just random coincidence, but either way, I love it. It's awesome. Not sure why
Mm,
it happens to me, but I'll try and accept as many as possible and hopefully forward that down the line to other people when I'm older.
yeah. And that's one of the great things about that your kind of perspective on things, right? Is we talked about this before we started this podcast was ambition. We talked about the idea of ambition being this kind of circular kind of process, right? Is a lot of people will say like you're ambitious or I'm ambitious. I got this recently. So someone said I was ambitious because I was talking to, you brought up the story about how I reached out to a CEO. You brought up the story how I, kind of talked to a few people that were outside of my comfort zone the same way you were doing. And someone said I was ambitious. And, I was like, I don't feel like I'm doing anything that's particularly ambitious, but it's kind of one of
Yeah.
those self-fulfilling things, right? So if you just say that you're not feeling ambitious and then you want to do more stuff that is considered ambitious, and you continue doing the things that are considered ambitious, well, then you'll never actually find yourself ambitious. You'll just keep, well, I'm not doing enough. I'm not doing enough. I'm not doing, which in itself is considered ambitious. And you end up in this kind of like a loop or this circular kind of pattern with your own mind where you're like, I'm not really ambitious. And then someone tells you what you did and you're like, that's kind of what an ambitious person would do. And I see the same thing in you, right? I see that same kind of like, you know, maybe it's like, the random chance that you keep saying, or maybe it's like God, maybe it's one of those things. But also it's like, I don't know many kids who are spending their free time learning about machine learning, learning about coding, learning about all of this other stuff. So I think it's kind of opportunity meets skill set, and your skill set obviously lends itself to, being a communicator, being someone who can listen to other people, being someone who kind of is, outside of this big realm of just kind of, learning, right? You're just you learn constantly, intake information, and stories leave like an actual impact on you that you can recall them and have some sort of memory of them. And that's a really big skill set to have. So I commend you, or I applaud you on that. Not commend you. I applaud you on that and your ability to do so. So we are hitting about the hour mark right now. I'm gonna wrap this podcast up. Thanks everyone for joining me on the first podcast. Simeon, any closing remarks you want to leave the audience with?
Yeah. So, final remark is something that my sister told me about a week ago,
Mm,
and it really hit home with me, and I'm trying to use that to my full advantage now. It's not comparing yourself to other people that are today, but like comparing yourself to you yesterday.
mm,
Like I can use you as an example. Like you today is definitely a more curious and more open person than you were even a month ago. Like
yeah.
things that you do in your free time now are way cooler and way more meaningful than things you were doing even a month ago.
Yeah.
So like if you can constantly improve and make sure that you today is better than you yesterday, I think it'll really help you out no matter who you are.
And those are some really good last words, Simeon. If the listeners want to connect with you, what is the LinkedIn, Simeon Patsolic, JCU
Thanks.
student?
Hmm.
All right, listeners, try to go out. I'll be posting this on my LinkedIn. So Simeon is one of my contacts if you just want to reach out to him directly. Physics major, interested in a bunch of different things as we went over in this podcast. Simeon, I will talk to you later.
Thank you. Have a good day.